Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in announces a package of direct financial support that'll help some 14 million middle to low-income households get through the economic emergency caused by the coronavirus. Expenses like national health insurance and utilities will be postponed as well. The pandemic hits the global smartphone industry. Worldwide, manufacturers saw their shipments fall last month by a record-breaking 38%. People just aren't going out to buy them. And the Prime Minister once again tells officials to be extra thorough in their quarantine measures for people entering South Korea from abroad. Everyone is to be quarantined for 2 weeks, regardless of their nationality or where they departed from. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun has again emphasized the importance of quarantining people coming in from abroad to slow the number of imported cases of the coronavirus. At a meeting Monday, Chung called for thorough quarantining at airports and tracking the whereabouts of all arrivals, as well as keeping them apart from the general public as they are taken to quarantine. Starting Wednesday, all visitors from abroad will be quarantined for 2 weeks, regardless of their nationality or where they departed from. He especially urged South Koreans to follow the rules if they're returning home after studying abroad. Chung also raised the need to protect medical staff dealing with the virus on the front lines, while promising to supply them with more protective equipment, such as face masks. For South Korea's grade school students, the Education Ministry is looking at moving classes online if the start of the semester has to be pushed back again. Schools nationwide were supposed to open a month ago but have been shut. They're supposed to open next Monday, but there's a chance of another delay. Yoon Jung-min tells us more.
The South Korean government is due to announce its latest decision on school openings, which have already been pushed back weeks as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. As it stands, schools and kindergartens in South Korea are scheduled to open on April 6, but authorities are mulling over opening online classes as they don't expect the coronavirus to be contained by next Monday. The announcement is due within the next 24 to 48 hours. A member of the National Assembly's Education Committee, Cho Seung-ri, said on Sunday, after a meeting with the government, that the date for opening schools cannot differ by region as the curriculum is linked to college entrance exams for high schoolers. He said it would be difficult to open schools too quickly as parents are concerned about the health of their children. Even if the government decides to open online classes, there are worries regarding students and schools having the proper platforms and equipment to undertake such an unprecedented move. Cho added he also asked schools to secure enough face masks for children, teachers, and other school staff. The Education Ministry is reportedly fine-tuning details, including whether they will open online classes for high schools first or open them all simultaneously. The government said it will discuss with health authorities, parents, and education authorities before announcing its decision. So far in South Korea, more than 600 confirmed coronavirus cases have been reported in those under the age of 19 years old. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has announced a major stimulus package that'll be used to provide emergency relief money to the majority of South Korea's middle and low-income households. And he says to fund it, the government will be drawing up a second supplementary budget. Kim Min-ji reports.
President Moon Jae-in has decided to provide financial support to households in the bottom 70% income bracket to help them get through the COVID-19 outbreak. At the third session of the Emergency Economic Council on Monday, Moon said that a four-person family would get 1 million won, roughly $820. The amount of support will differ depending on the size of the family. Some 14 million households are expected to benefit from the program, with aid to be given in the form of vouchers or local currency. The president said that it was not an easy decision, given that the package is expected to cost roughly $7.4 billion, but he said people have the right to receive benefits, citing their participation in quarantine efforts and the impact on their daily lives.
정부가 재정 운영에 큰 부담을 안으면서 결단을 내리게 된 것은 어려운 국민들의 생계를 지원하고 방역의 주체로서 일상 활동을 희생하며 위기 극복에 함께 나서 주신 것에 대해 위로와 응원이 필요하다고 여겼기 때문입니다.
To help fund the program, the government will draw up a second supplementary budget worth almost $5.8 billion, with the aim of having it passed at the National Assembly by April. Noting that not all citizens will be eligible for the financial aid, Moon asked for understanding from those who are economically better off, saying that the government needs to maintain enough fiscal room to prepare for any potential economic shock.
그러나 정부로서는 끝을 알 수 없는 경제 충격에 대비하고 고용 불안과 기업의 유동성 위기에 신속하게 대처하기 위해 재정 여력을 최대한 비축할 필요가 있습니다. 또한 재정 여력의 비축과 신속한 이하 합의를 위해 재원의 대부분을 뼈를 깎는 정부 예산 지출 구조 조정으로 마련하겠습니다.
Moon added that the government will reduce, postpone, or exempt payments of national health insurance, national pensions, employment insurance, and industrial accident compensation insurance, as well as utility fees for the low-income tier, the self-employed, and small businesses. He said that it's hoped that the burden of living expenses will be eased for the low-income bracket, and that small businesses will be able to operate normally and maintain employment. According to the top office, President Moon said that the latest measures are aimed at boosting confidence in the government's economic policies. It added that if all goes according to plan, financial aid will be dispersed in mid-May. 김민지, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Now, we just heard about these direct payments the government's going to give to South Korean households and other measures. Tell us a bit more about those and what effect they might have on the real economy and the financial markets.
Okay, well, there has been a lot of measures taken by the government in the last 3 weeks or so, and that's because the economic problem for coronavirus is really developing into not only a medical problem, but a problem involving economic demand, supply, and finance. On the 18th, we had $32 trillion won assistance program that was designed to help the hardest hit industries and exporting firms like the tourism industry, transportation industry, and the airlines. And on the 23rd, we had 100 trillion won assistance, which were designed to keep businesses alive until the coronavirus crisis is over. So in that particular plan, you had 41.8 trillion won allocated to the financial market so that the bond market would continue. Securities market will be stabilized. This was done in part because we're now in a financial panic in most of the countries in the world, and that means there's a lot of flight to safety, flight to liquidity, and in the past that led to a credit crunch. The firms could not get much loans from banks or the financial sector, so even a firm which could have survived the crisis could not get loans, and they died off. And this time they wanted to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then of that 100 billion won, trillion won, 58.3 trillion won was allocated to assistance to firms, including not only small and medium-sized firms, but also larger firms. And in this particular case, we are giving 200,000 to 1 million won for households. The richest 30% of the households will be exempted from getting this payment, but it's designed to make people secure that they are getting some income even through the coronavirus, so that hopefully they'll keep spending money. Buyers buying things means that sellers can sell things and makers can make things. So we really need people to feel secure in that their income, so that they keep on spending and they keep the economy going around.
Well, now, elsewhere, tomorrow, the Bank of Korea is going to release the first $12 billion from the currency swap with the U.S. It's also promised, of course, unlimited liquidity for the local market, unprecedented. How much of a help do you think this will be?
Okay, well, it'll help in the medium term. It's also helping in the short term as well, but there's going to be a lot of instability. And that's because this measure is also designed to get around the credit crunch somewhat. What the Bank of Korea is doing is that because so many people want cash because things are so uncertain, that the Bank of Korea is making sure that people have as much cash as they want. If there is a shortfall of cash, then banks may not lend their money out to businesses and will result in a cash credit crunch, like I mentioned in the previous question. But the problem is the Bank of Korea can make the cash available. They can encourage lending. They can reduce regulations that stop the banks from lending, but they cannot force the banks to lend. And because they have the pool of cash, firms will be feeling more secure, and investors will feel more secure in buying stocks. But unless the banks actually do lend out that cash, there might be some flows and ebbs in the firm's fortunes and the stock market as well.
Well, and finally, oil prices dipping below $20 a barrel briefly. Are we headed into oil in the teens of dollars?
It's quite a possibility, and that's because the demand has fallen so much because of the coronavirus. You cannot travel. All the airlines are now holding back their flights. And then next month, the agreement between OPEC and Russia on limiting their production runs out. And even now, there's so much supply that we really don't know where we can store them. So there is a possibility that the oil price will go down to the teens. It's a realistic possibility, but hopefully, when the coronavirus crisis ends and people start spending again, it should disappear.
All right, Professor Yang, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Now, in the second part of a two-part series, our Kim Da-mi takes a look at the difficulties from facing the smartphone industry amid this outbreak.
The COVID-19 crisis is hammering all industries across the globe, and the smartphone industry is no exception. Worldwide shipments of smartphones dropped 38% on-year in February, the largest drop in history. It's not due to consumers' lack of income, rather they're afraid or unable to go outside to make purchases during this pandemic. On top of the demand shock, there have also been production and supply issues because factories around the globe are closing to limit COVID-19 infections. South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics is putting production on hold until April 14th at its Noida factory in India, the world's biggest mobile phone manufacturing facility. These production issues are also affecting global firms like Apple, whose supply chains are dependent on Asian companies. For example, Samsung produced over 80% of the world's OLED smartphone displays in the April to June period last year.
They will have to do the hedging, lining up the alternative suppliers and alternative quick methods in terms of changing sources of supply and so on.
Selling more phones online can be one way to reach customers, but in some countries, the way phones are sold makes this very difficult. Disruptions in the smartphone supply chain could also mean the release of new models could be delayed by months. In fact, Apple reportedly plans to push back the launch of its first 5G iPhone, possibly until next year. Analysts say that it's not just about when the pandemic ends, but also how long the recovery takes.
Because all the countries started at a different place, countries differ in how they track the disease. Korea has done a very good job of tracking, United States has not. So all the countries are going to have different impacts and different lengths.
And even if we could have the supply chains magically pop back to full and seamless operation, we need an appropriate policy response on the demand side to keep our economies healthy and to handle as best we can the effects of this crisis.
There is a hint of hope that smartphone sales this month won't be as bad as February. But the complexity of the global smartphone supply chain suggests the road back to normal will be bumpy and unpredictable. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Retail sales in South Korea last month were up 9.1% compared to a year earlier, as people started buying more online because of the coronavirus. The Trade Ministry's data on Monday showed the combined sales of 26 major offline and online retailers came to $8.68 billion US. Online sales surged 34.3%, in large part because people are staying home and not going out. Online, there was a surge in sales of food, sanitary items, and household products. Offline retailers, however, saw sales plunge 7.5%, with department stores suffering the most with a drop of more than 21%. The Seoul metropolitan government is going to provide financial support for employees of small businesses who've been put on unpaid leave. The city will pay small businesses up to 500,000 Korean won, or about $412 US a month. Businesses with up to 5 employees can apply for the support in the first 10 days of each month. Workers will receive $20 a day for up to 2 months, but only one worker can apply from each business, or 2 per business in the hard-hit tourism sector. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.